Good evening, I'm Errol Laborde. Marcia Cavanaugh is off tonight. It was hard to tell what was more frigid earlier this week, the weather or the elections. Both are heating up, however, as we head toward the weekend. We'll be looking tonight at the campaigning, as well as the freeze blasts, plus a new poll in the U.S. Senate race and Ray Nagin on trial. On the bench for us are tonight's informed sources. Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter for NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. John Maginnis, publisher, La Politics Weekly. Norman Robinson, news anchor, WDSU TV Channel 6, and Stephanie Grace, columnist for the New Orleans Advocate. And we'll begin by talking about the Nagin trial. Stephanie, you've been covering it. It did get off to a fast start after having some delays during the week.
Extremely fast. 2 days in, we've already been through some major witnesses. And there's been a lot of news that's come out, of course. This is the same prosecution team that prosecuted Mark St. Pierre, who was one of the City Hall contractor who probably will be a witness against it. They're good lawyers. I mean, this is, they know what they're doing. And they started off with a guy named Rodney Williams, one of the contractors who has pleaded guilty to bribing Ray Nagin. I think it was a good move because I think he's not the one you've heard a lot about. He's not, one of these wheeler-dealer types with the private jets. He's a guy who seemed to try to get business with the city the right way, was really stymied. He testified that Nagin came to him wanting money and he made the wrong choice. But he was, if not sympathetic, I think he's probably less unsympathetic than some of these other characters will be. We moved on to one of his colleagues, and then we were Greg Meffert. Remember him, the former tech chief for Ray Nagin, who introduced him to a lot of these people, and has pleaded guilty and is now testifying against him. And boy, he went through. There were emails and messages back and forth. There was some really salty language. He talked about how people in the Nagin administration, when they were setting up these deals, they would use the BlackBerry's pin-to-pin function, because that way they would be direct messages, so they wouldn't go through email, and that way they avoided being public records. So those of us who tried to deal with public records in the Nagin administration remember what an issue that was. One of the interesting things is there's a contractor named Aaron Bennett who is not supposed to testify, at least for the prosecution. He's also in prison for having bribed Jeff Hingle, the former Plaquemines Parish sheriff. And he's someone who they viewed as, he arranged one of these flights to Chicago that the Nagins took and was kind of a conduit for some of the deals involving the tech companies and the granite companies and all of that. And Nagin and Meffert pretty early on identified him as a pretty loose cannon, which is not surprising, again, to those of us who've covered him. And there are some emails. What he did is he actually sent an email, apparently, to Nagin using city email. And, of course, they freaked out because that's public record. So then one of the things the defense is relying on is there's an email from Nagin back to Aaron Bennett saying, I'm sorry, I can't do business with you. My son's granite company can't do business with you as long as you're doing business with the city. So the defense is using that as a sign that Nagin was doing the right thing. Of course, what Meffert testified is behind the scenes, they were calling him reckless. They were saying, we have to get rid of this guy. He's going to blow the whole thing. So it's pretty damning so far.
And of course, people have been wondering, why didn't the former mayor take a plea deal? Well, it's beginning to look fairly obvious that the federal government didn't have to really do a plea deal. They had this case wrapped up. They had all of their conspirators named. They had them documented. They had paper trails for everybody involved. Of course, the only thing the defense has at its beckoning is to try and paint the witnesses for the government as people who are lying to save their own skin.
And of course, Meffert, remember, had that civil deposition where now he admits he did lie. So then, of course, the question is, were you lying then or are you lying now?
Are you lying now?
Which often really doesn't work in these cases.
It doesn't work in the case because you have these emails.
Right.
These emails that substantiate the allegations being brought by federal prosecutors. These guys have been caught in their own web.
Right. And it's perfectly understandable why they would, human nature, why you wouldn't cop to it at first if you think maybe you can get away with it or you're stunned. I mean, usually the FBI corners you and you don't know that the questions are coming.
What's your impression of the jury, of the makeup?
as you know, federal juries are drawn from 13 parish area. There's one African American. There are 2 Asian American members. The rest seem to be white. Attentive so far. We'll see.
Everybody was trying to speculate about the impact or the dynamics of the jury. In this case, I have a hard time putting much credibility in whether it would matter, whether they were black,
Right.
white, green, gray, or purple, because of the preponderance of evidence
Right.
that's being presented by the federal prosecution so far. I thought at the outset, before trial started, that there was a long shot that Nagin could at least get a hung jury. Considering the evidence that's been presented so far,
Right.
and the lack of the ability of the defense to lay a hand or a glove on the prosecutor's witnesses
So far.
I would say that it's probably the federal prosecutors are batting 1,000 and the defense at this point is batting 0.
Okay, well, Mark, the jury's in. It was cold this week. We could have used some global warming this week. I mean, as the guy that's covered the weather, is this a sign of the future, or is this just something that happens from time to time?
Oh, this is something that happens from time to time. Anybody who is attempting to look at whether or not this foretells the end of global warming should go look on the other side of the planet at Australia and see that the same days that we had our freeze, they were having temperatures of 105 to 115
Right.
degrees, and
derail the
major
Australian Open?
wildfires going on throughout the country. So that's, that's it. It's not quite that simple, unfortunately. But it was a significant event for us, and it's because it's been a couple of years since we've really had some cold weather. And of course, anytime we get anything that's solid that's coming out of the air in New Orleans, it's a big story for us. The other real concern that everybody has in New Orleans about weather is, well, how do people drive through this stuff? And one of the interesting things is that everybody got on board fairly quickly, largely because we had a precursor event the week before on the Friday that gave people a good idea that, wow, there's going to be a heck of a lot of accidents if this happens again. There were, I think, 200 accidents and 2 people killed in the earlier event. So state officials and local officials both moved immediately to shut things down and warn people to stay at home. And unlike Atlanta, the schools decided that they would close, and most truckers stayed out of the way and all that sort of stuff. One of the interesting things that I heard, and it's one of those little scenarios that you really don't think about for a while, even though you've been living down here for a long time, our roads are actually built so that they drain from water. So you've got these striations that are cutting across the road perpendicular to the way that the road goes. Well, that's great during a rainstorm, but it's not good during a winter event, because what happens is you end up getting water in those little cracks in the road, and it freezes, and you end up with the infamous black ice that can result in people spinning around and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that's interesting. And of course, we don't have the supplies that other states have. The amount of salt that we have to get out on the roads is limited. And as we saw in a couple of locations, some of the parishes went a little bit overboard, putting so much dirt out on roads that you were spinning, but it wasn't because of the ice, it was because of the dirt.
When the mayor of Atlanta was apologizing for telling everybody to leave at the same time and causing this traffic jam, we already broke that precedent back. Remember in 1989, the Christmas freeze, when the authorities said, okay, everybody go home. All right? And so everybody left at the same time. If they wouldn't have said anything, people would have just gone home naturally.
Yeah, and unfortunately in '89, the big problem was that the temperature was already well below freezing, and so people got out on the road. They didn't leave early enough, and the result was that they're sliding all over the place. So fortunately, we got out of that.
I thought the public official leadership on this was outstanding in that they didn't hesitate. They didn't hesitate to make the decision to pull the trigger and say, okay, everybody should just stay put, as opposed to worrying about what would happen if businesses closed and did not open. They went ahead and said, okay, for the sake of public safety, everybody should stay put. If you don't have to be any place, don't go. don't get out on the roads and drive. So I think that probably prevented us from having an Atlanta.
And I think the good part about that is that it's a precursor for what is likely to happen later this year when we enter hurricane season, and there may be a potential hurricane, that we already have that process going on. And indeed, officials with the National Weather Service were meeting with forecasters yesterday to talk about how to develop new warnings for hurricanes. And it looks like we'll be seeing some really interesting stuff, including new maps that will show what storm surge is, that will give people a better understanding of what's going to happen to them next time a storm occurs.
Something I was wondering about, a problem that New Orleans used to have was that there were so many old homes with space heaters in them. And anytime there was a cold weather event, there'd be fires because people lighting these space heaters was, first of all, burn the oxygen, but they're also very dangerous. I imagine there's probably fewer space heaters anymore. Probably newer houses aren't being developed. And I didn't hear about too many house fires this week, but to me it's a significant story.
I think one of the reasons for that is because most houses got redone after Katrina, and the result of that was that you had some of that older equipment coming out, and you have much safer equipment that has now been installed with modern housing.
And space heaters themselves are safer.
Yeah, exactly.
These days.
Exactly.
Oh, they burn up, yeah. And so to me that's a significant
automatic
story
shut-off.
right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tomorrow is Election Day. And so let's run down the ballot. And Stephanie, let's talk about the mayor's race. First of all, you were on the Channel 4 debate last night. Any impressions? Or?
Well, it was my impression of the mayor, actually, was that he was ready to be done with this. He was feeling very confident, possibly because he had a good week because of the weather, I think. He's not the mayor of Atlanta. Nothing bad happened, but he got to be all over the media in command and control mode, which he's very good at, as we know.
Yeah, don't tell him, though, that's a factor, because he bristled at that. I mentioned it to him, and he said, oh, if I win, it's not because I work hard and I've done a good job. It's because I was out there during this crisis with the weather.
That's our mayor, yes. He was confident. One of the things that was very interesting was Michael Bagnaris has really tried to set himself up. There are three candidates, but Michael Bagnaris, the former judge, has tried to position himself as the real contender against him, the real challenger. And we gave them the opportunity to ask each other a question, and Mitch Landrieu chose to ask Donatus King a question, which I think was a message to Michael Bagnaris that I don't take you all that seriously.
This race called to attention whether there would be dynamics similar to the post-Katrina election with Ray Nagin.
Yes.
So far, we haven't seen that.
No.
This.
And you're talking about the kind of
we're talking about,
Republicans plus
Republicans,
African American,
the African Americans, the disenfranchised. The voters, the white voting bloc that's anti-Landry, whether he, being Michael Bagnaris, could corral those votes. We haven't seen that.
No.
We haven't seen that kind of campaign from Bagnaris.
No.
This is a heavyweight.
We haven't seen the Republican money that we thought we might see.
This is a heavyweight bout where Landry is the incumbent, he's the champion. You got to knock him out with a haymaker. There has been no haymaker in this campaign so far. So it appears that the mayor is on cruise control.
I think they know what's going to knock him out is term limitations. That this is his last term, and so, and so I think a lot of people just wait until next time.
Exactly.
Right.
It won't be because of this election.
Right. Well, one thing that we asked each of the candidates, it was most relevant for Mayor Landrieu, obviously, if elected, would you serve the full 4 years? Because, of course, there's some talk that he might be turning around and looking at running for governor. He said yes. Does that rule it out? You tell me.
Probably not. I haven't seen it before.
Yeah. You've never stopped him before.
Circumstances, my job's been finished here, the people call, and
All right. Let's go to Norman and talk about some of the council elections. First of all, for the first time ever, the council at large districts are divided into two separate elections.
So you've got Division 1.
Division 1.
And you've got Division 2.
Division 1 is the one that Stacey Head would be the incumbent. So let's just go down the line. Any comments?
Stacey Head,
and y'all jump in.
Stacey Head, I don't think she has any problems with her challenger, Eugene Green. Though he is formidable, having been part of the administration of former Mayor Mark Morial, and of course Mark Morial's father, Dutch Morial. He's run a good race. He's done very well in the debates. But I just think that Stacey Head has a coalition of voters from a broad spectrum of the electorate, and I think, given her record, as a champion of the people, that she probably will win this race. She probably will be reelected to office.
She seems to have put some of these issues that she once had behind her, of maybe having somewhat of an abrasive personality. She's really.
Of course, that was prompted by Ray Nagin being in office and having the Nagin administration deal with it.
And exactly, she has explained that some of the people who painted her as this person with an abrasive personality were themselves abrasive, coming to her house at 5 a.m. in the morning, holding a loud protest, waking her children up. So she was incensed about that. So that story was told out of context. And once you look at the story in its context, you can see why a mother whose children had been awakened at 5 a.m. in the morning would be a little angry about that.
Okay, and the other at-large District 2?
You've got District 2, you've got Hedge Morrell, who's in that, and she's in there along with Ernie, Freddie Charbonnet, who's an attorney, and of course the attorney, well-known attorney, Jason Williams, who happens to be the son-in-law of former Mayor Sidney Bartholomew.
And this was a seat that Jackie Clarkson held, who was term limited.
She was term limited and is now in District C, but the word on the street is that Hedge Morrell is the odds-on favorite candidate to beat in that race.
There's a new mailer. You know, it's the time of the election when you get the last-minute mailers, and I got one in my mailbox from Jason Williams yesterday, attacking Cynthia Hedge Morrell on some of the issues that we knew were out there, that she hadn't paid her water bill or the trash bills for water bill for a while.
All right, let's move kind of up down District A.
You've got Susan Guidry in that. She's the incumbent, and nobody seems to think that her opponents, David Capascio, Jason Coleman, Stephen Gordon, and Drew Ward, the only Republican in the entire
the entire city ballot, one Republican.
Yeah, and as Stephanie mentioned before this program began, the most liberal. But odds on favorite as she is, of course, going to be elected. And of course, LaToya Cantrell in District D had no opponent, so she's.
So we can project that right now.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. We can call that. We can pretend and call that race.
Okay.
District C.
Now in District C, this was strange because Jackie Clarkson was term limited at large. You figured, well, she's retiring after a long career. Then all of a sudden, she's running back for her old District seat.
Yeah, and she's got 4 other candidates in there. And I will say this, and with no disrespect to the other candidates, but I don't think they're going to present much of a challenge for Jacqueline, outside of Nadine Ramsey in Algiers. But I've done the District C debates, and it looked like Jackie Clarkson, at least in the debate that I moderated, was the only person who really knew the issues. And if you're going to vote for someone based on their ability to embrace, comprehend the issues, then probably you're going to vote for the old favorite, Jackie Clarkson.
Okay. In District D.
District D. Joseph Bowie, Jared Brossette, and Dalton Savoy.
This is Cynthia Hedge Morrell's district, who was term limited.
She was term limited out of D. And the word on the street is that it's probably going to be Bowie and Brossette in a runoff.
And Brossette is the incumbent state legislator.
Brossette is the incumbent state legislator, but he's also a protege of Cynthia Hedge Morrell. She's been grooming him for that particular position.
Okay, in District E.
District E, word on the street is that Cynthia Willard Lewis is probably going to get back in. And the word against James Gray is that he has not been forthcoming. He has not been too involved with the grassroots movement out there. He has not been plugged in.
And James Gray is the incumbent. He won the seat in a special election.
And interestingly enough, Cynthia Willard Lewis endorsed him.
We just you hear it on the radio now, and that's been the most bitter race going on. Those two are going and calling each other a liar. And
exactly. There are 2 races now. There's one that's public, and then there's one that flies below the radar called the grassroots. And Stephanie alluded to that when she talked about flyers coming out.
Okay, let's move on to the sheriff's race. Who wants it, John? You want it?
Well, thought Marlon Guzman, all the trouble he's been through early in the year, all the bad publicity he got for the jail. He seems to have run a strong campaign, and
he's got all the endorsements pretty much.
Yeah, to get the Times-Picayune to endorse you, and
political groups,
and so, but it still could end up being a runoff because Charlie Foti is, well known. I think polls showing that there was neither one is over 40%, and having the presence of Ira Thomas in the race. I could see Gusman leading, but maybe being caught in a runoff with Charlie Fogarty.
Gusman has really run this race like he's won it already. Mm-hmm. He's been the do I dare define him as the statesman? But according to his his comportment and his decorum doing the debates, he's kind of been the guy who's I'm the sheriff, I'm in charge, I know what's really going on. These other guys are playing politics.
We've had problems, so we've turned the corner. That's his line.
And the coroner's race. And this is Frank Mignard, who'd filed and then moved out and
exactly.
disqualified.
Jeffrey Rouse is somebody who has been working in his office on the mental health side. And Vincent Collada is a physician also, and Dwight McKenna is a physician who has run for this office before. I think Rouse is probably the favorite. It could be a runoff.
I'm thinking that it's probably going to be a runoff between Rouse and McKenna in this one, and I think it comes down to name recognition.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on, let me just ask Mark real quick. Mark, at the mayor level, at the council level, is there an environmental issue that they should be talking about that they're not? What's the biggest concern?
Well, the environmental, really infrastructure, and that's going to be continuing. Where to find enough money to really pay for the sewer and water improvements in the city, which the city still is like this close to getting zapped by EPA for a violation. So that's a significant problem. And within that process, there's this whole issue of restoring the view of water to the community in a variety of different areas, trying to figure out ways of getting people back along sides of the canals and things like that. I think those will become key issues as we move forward.
And John, later in the year, there's going to be a Senate race in which Mary Landrieu is the incumbent. There's a new poll out this week.
Well, there was a poll out by Rasmussen Research, which is probably a right-leaning organization, and it showed a really statistical tie between Mary Landrieu and Bill Cassidy. It was 44-42 Cassidy with a error margin of four points either way. So it's a statistical tie this far out. The only identifier in the poll that I could see was a party affiliation. This is, it's been a tough year for Democrats so far in Louisiana. We don't know a whole lot else about the poll. We know Rasmussen didn't have a great track record in the 2012 presidential election, a lot of the Senate elections. So, it's one more poll, but it's just significant that shows that Mary Landrieu has done a tough time getting out of the lower 40s. The other part of the poll, they matched her up against Paul Hollis, who just got into the race and not even known by like 40% of the people in the state, according to this poll, and that was a tie too. Now, one thing I thought of is that the super PACs have been on slamming Landrieu, the Democratic PACs have been on slamming Cassidy, and Paul Hollis has been standing under an oak tree, talking about how he chose Louisiana. So of course he's gonna look a little better. So the timing of the polls, we haven't, you had to see the whole thing of a race when everyone gets to attack each other, when Bill Cassidy gets to get on and introduce himself, which he's not done yet.
He's been quiet because the super PACs have been kind of doing his business for him.
The real winner in that race is TV, because they're getting a heck of a lot of money.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. But
gotta pay those big bucks.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. But even I've been talking to some very conservative Republicans, and they even concede that Landrieu is going to be hard to beat. Mary Landrieu is going to be most difficult to beat.
And it looks like she might have a big victory with this flood insurance bill that's going through this week.
And of course, the leader of the Democratic Party on the Senate side is giving her ample leeway to lead on many of these issues that are affecting us here in Southeast Louisiana.
And that's the case. If this come November, if this is as I think the Republicans are saying, if it's a national race, we're going to win. If it's a local race, we're going to lose. If Mary Landrieu gets it to be who's best for Louisiana, who's done the most, who might be the next energy chairman, as opposed to some other liberal Democrat who could be the best for the oil and gas industry. If those issues come to play, then also we can think, well, we have a Republican senator. Let's keep it Democratic.
She might borrow a line from her brother's campaign. Let's keep it rolling.
Right. But the health care, the Affordable Care Act, which was supposed to be the killer for President Obama, turned out not to be in the 2012 election. We don't know come November of 2014 if people just accept the Affordable Care Act as it is. Politically, you may not like it, but in your own life, either you got your private insurance but of course now if this causes private insurance premiums to go sky high, then everyone could be, hitting their pocketbook, and then that could hurt.
Okay, before we look ahead, I want to look back to last night. If anybody was on Canal Street around 9 o'clock last night, you'd have seen a strange sight here. I got some photos. That is Endymion's new float, the Pontchartrain Beach float. They actually took it out for a test run last night along Canal Street, testing, making the turn at Carrollton and Canal.
At least they tested it.
It's a 7-unit tandem float parade.
Seven units?
It's a 7-unit, and they had Ed Muniz, the captain, was walking the street alongside, and they did the whole route from Orleans Avenue to the Superdome.
They shut down the city for this.
No, they
No,
just
they did
but they just had a police escort,
Okay.
and they just tested every turn, and people in the streetcars and people at the restaurants were just like gawking. So it's only in New Orleans kind of sight.
Yeah,
so,
they actually test something.
so what should we be looking ahead to in the near future, Mark?
Well, actually, I'm going to promote myself on Monday morning. We're going to have a coffee talk talking about what's going to be up in the environmental issues for the next year at Village Coffee and Tea, 5335 Ferret Street at 9 o'clock in the morning, and hope our readers will come out and
So
join
9
the
o'clock
conversation.
next Monday morning, Village Coffee and Tea. What's the address again?
It's 5335 Ferret Street.
5335 Ferret Street. Get to meet him in person.
Yeah, you will.
I'll give you a Pulitzer Prize winner right there. Okay, John.
Well, if David Vitter can have a super PAC, why can't Mary Landrieu? And she's one's just been formed for her called Blue Pelican PAC, which will be there to promote her in her Senate race. They will be able to accept donations up to $100,000, and maybe if David Vitter is successful in having that limit, or David Vitter's PAC is able to get that limit, then the sky will be the limit. So it'll be some extra ammunition working for Landrieu in the fall election.
Okay, Norman.
The clerk of court for Orleans Parish is predicting a 48% voter turnout tomorrow. I think it's going to be around 36 to 38 percent at the very highest. And I say that because I really don't see much fire in this in this campaign season. Maybe it's because it was a short campaign season. Maybe because they were competing with the Saints and other things that were taking place during the campaign season. But I really don't see a lot of energy.
Stephanie.
One thing that the other Mayor Landrieu brought up at the debate last night was charity hospitals. So if he wins re-election, I think it'll be interesting to see. He talked about moving a municipal complex, as we know, he wants to do into charity hospital. He also said he wants to do it with other tenants who want to be there, which suggests that maybe we're moving beyond the idea of moving the civil court in because those judges do not want to be there, as Michael Bagneris made clear.
Okay. Well, thanks to all of you for wanting to be here tonight, and thanks to all you for coming. Good show. See you all again next week. Bye-bye.